Lepo pozdravljeni. Veseli me, da ste si danes kljub pestremu in bogatemu dogajanju na ZRC vzeli čas in boste prisluhnili našemu aprilskemu predavanju po historičnem seminarju. Naslov predavanja se v slovenščini glasi: Nas bo dediščina rešila, nesnovna dediščina in obrat trajnostnemu razvoju. Preden pa besedo predam naši današnji gosti in naši gostiteljici, današnji dr. Šperi Vidne Kloze, pa samo še napovem, da bo naslednje predavanje pri historičnem seminarju 15. maja, ko bo naš gost dr. Kuzmani, zgodovinar in slavist z Univerze na Dunaju, ki nam bo predstavil ukvarjanje z večnarodnostjo v sodobnem evropskem prostoru. Želim vam lepo, prijetno poslušanje današnjega predavanja in najlepša hvala za obisk.
Lepo pozdravljam tudi v mojem imenu, v imenu skupine programske dediščine na obrobjih in organizirajočih inštitutov, Inštituta za slovensko narodopisje. Jaz bom pa nadaljevala v angleščini, zato da bo lahko Chiara tudi razumela. So I will continue your presentation in English. Chiara Bortolotto, our today's guest lecture speaker, is an anthropologist specializing in heritage policies and global governance. She received her PhD in social anthropology and ethnology from the School of Advanced Studies in the Social Sciences, so-called EHES, in Paris, and she currently holds the UNESCO Chair on Intangible Cultural Heritage and Sustainable Development at CCRJ Paris University. Before her current position, she was the principal investigator of the project UNESCO Frictions at EHES and held several fellowships at the University of Cambridge, the Free University of Brussels, the Laboratory of Anthropology and History in Paris, and at the University of Milan. Her research explores the social life of the UNESCO Convention for the Safeguarding of the Intangible Cultural Heritage of 2003, addressing in particular the intersection between heritage and sustainable development. It is based on multi-sited, multi-level and, as she said, multi-positioned participant observation of the implementation of the Convention. For example, she observed the intergovernmental negotiations during the drafting of the Convention in 2003 and has since then attended almost every annual session of the Intergovernmental Committee, several general assemblies of the state parties, and numerous expert meetings. In addition to this observing, Chiara has also actively participated in the implementation of the Convention at various levels. For example, she was involved in preparing the nomination file for the Luminara Festival in Pisa, Italy. She took part in the ICH inventory campaign launched by the Ministry of Culture in France, and since 2012 she also served as advisor for the same ministry, and since 2011 she has worked as a UNESCO facilitator for its capacity buildings across Europe. Actually, I began following Chiara's publications nearly a decade ago when I joined the Alp Foodway project, which aimed to inscribe alpine foodways first on the UNESCO representative list and then on its register of good safeguarding practices. And I was deeply inspired by your capacity for multi-positional and multi-level observation of diverse agencies operating in the fields of heritage and governance. Just over a year ago, in November 23, I had the pleasure to meet her in person at the 20th anniversary celebration of the Convention in Milan, hosted by Lombardy region, and I seized this opportunity to invite you to share, in the spirit of the Convention, your rich experiences with us at the historical seminar. I would like to thank the historical seminar staff for organization of this event, and now after this presentation of your involvement at the universities, committees, different countries, different projects. We are eagerly looking for your answer. Will heritage save us?
Thank you very much, Spela, and thank you also to the Research Center of the Slovenian Academy of Sciences and Art and to the organizer of this historic seminar. I'm really honored to be part of this program, and thank you, Spela, for the presentation. And I'm really glad that we finally made it. We have been planning it since 2023, so I'm really happy that I'm finally here, and I'm looking forward to share my research with you and to discuss also your project, in particular in within the program of Heritage on the Border. So I am afraid the answer to this question, will heritage save us, is probably no. But I thought it was a compelling question for us, and in a way it's also the question that I have been hearing in a way during my fieldwork. This is how I translate what I've been observing during the last 10 years, more or less. So in this presentation, I would like to share some of the reflections and yes, the thoughts that have been emerging within the UNESCO Chair on Intangible Cultural Heritage and Sustainable Development over the last 4 years, more or less. And that were also recently presented in a book that was just published that has the same title. So yes, I suggest to start and to see how I reply to this question in a way, and then we can discuss it together, I hope. So within this UNESCO chair, we are exploring two main questions. So on the one hand, what does intangible cultural heritage do to sustainable development? Or said otherwise, how is intangible cultural heritage as a policy field contributing to promoting models of sustainability? And then the second question is what does sustainable development do to intangible cultural heritage? And this will be really my main focus here. So how thinking intangible cultural heritage policies in terms of sustainable development transforms the understanding of heritage. And this is important also for engaging with heritage on the ground, because if we use the concept of heritage as a policy tool, it is important to understand how the authorized heritage narratives at the UNESCO levels are evolving. And so I will try to tackle these issues empirically using the data collected through ethnographic engagement with the international governance of the UNESCO Convention, and through participant observation of its implementation on the ground. So I will briefly introduce the two concepts that are underpinning my work. The first one is that of sustainable development. And during the last decades, the international community has driven the reflection on a normative understanding of sustainable development. This definition that you see here is a very old one, but is still really used in all UNESCO documents that I have seen. Even if since 1987, the concept of sustainable development at the international level or used by the international community has gone through successive reconceptualizations and shifting emphasis in particular from intergenerational concerns to a more holistic ambition, integrating also economic, social, environmental aspects. And then it culminated, I would say, in the set of principles, the famous 17 Sustainable Development Goals, in which that were established in 2015, and that as the concept of sustainable development itself has been very much criticized as hegemonic and Western-centric concept, so very compartmentalized in a way, and that don't really aim at real change, but eventually at pursuing growth and with a greenish twist, I would say. But then we can come back on the discussion. And then there is the other concept that is underpinning my presentation here is that of intangible cultural heritage. You might be already familiar with it, but very briefly, so this concept was introduced by the UNESCO Convention in the early 2000s, with the key objective of promoting cultural diversity against globalization and cultural homogenization, which were the main concern at the international level at the end of the last century. So in the UNESCO definition, intangible cultural heritage corresponds to the social and cultural practices that communities, groups, and individuals identify as intangible, as their heritage, and they choose to consider as heritage. So there is this attempt at promoting heritage, what I've called heritage self-determination, so a subjective perspective on what heritage is. And then also participatory approaches to heritage. Because you see so that communities are really a little bit or like community participation is really a mantra in the language of the convention, and you see that this is reflected also in the definition of intangible cultural heritage. Another important thing in this definition is that these practices that are increasingly referred to as living heritage are meant to evolve and to adapt to play a significant role in the contemporary world. So you see they are constantly recreated in this definition. And what is interesting also is that sustainable development was just mentioned at the very end of this definition, saying that intangible cultural heritage has to be compatible with sustainable development, but this clearly sustainable development was not a policy priority at that time. So the idea behind intangible cultural heritage was really to showcase the cultural diversity that was embodied in those practices. So indeed, the element the elements inscribed on the international list and established by the convention that are more than 730 today, or also that are inscribed on national inventories, provide evidence of this diversity, of this cultural diversity. But they are also seen by some of my interlocutors, such, for instance, I'm now quoting an NGO representative from North America, as what he defined a folkloric menu for tourists. And I argue that with the UNESCO alignment to the 2030 agenda, the policy priority changed, and with them also the understanding and the representation of intangible cultural heritage. And in this process, UNESCO intangible cultural heritage narratives are departing from this emphasis on cultural diversity as an end in itself toward an understanding of intangible cultural heritage and therefore also of cultural diversity as a resource for sustainable development. And this was clear, for example, in this official statement produced at the end of an event organized by the UNESCO Secretariat in Seoul to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the convention in 2023. And this document, which is, I'm sorry, is very small, but it's called the Seoul Vision for the Future of Safeguarding Living Heritage for Sustainable Development and Peace, as you can see from the title. So this document is really emphasizing the idea that intangible cultural heritage is a resource for sustainable development. And then here comes this sentence that I have heard so many times within the UNESCO social world, I would say, where during the last 10 years, basically everybody was saying that sustainable development was at the heart of the convention, of this Intangible Cultural Heritage Convention. But what I'm arguing now is that, indeed, and I try to demonstrate that, is that this is not true in a way, because sustainable development has not been a political priority for the convention for a very long time. And as you could see also from the definition, it was really at the end of the definition. Instead, I argue that what we are witnessing today is a process of what I call sustainabilization of intangible cultural heritage, and also of climatization in a way, which is a subcategory of sustainabilization, but is also the term sustainabilization. This concept is a concept that was suggested by these colleagues in 2017, and that inspired the other, that I take this concept, I made up this concept of sustainabilization based on climatization, that I find interesting because basically it was, this colleague says that climatization is this social process in which climate change, or sustainable development in our case, is becoming the frame of reference for the mediation and hierarchization of other global issues. So basically, and this applies also to heritage today. This is what I'm claiming. It has not been always the case, but today we tend to think also heritage and heritage policies in terms of sustainability. And this process of sustainabilization and of climatization also of intangible cultural heritage is promoted by UNESCO in different ways. Through, for instance, normative text, and you see here the operational directives that accompany the implementation of the convention, where a new chapter on intangible cultural heritage safeguarding and sustainable development was added in 2016. So through normative text, I would say, also through projects that are launched and supported by the UNESCO Secretariat, such as this on climate change. So it is an expert meeting and roundtable discussion. So all these events, in a way, are there to emphasize the importance of sustainable development in heritage safeguarding. And also this sustainabilization is reflected in the list of intangible cultural heritage, because here intangible cultural heritage is increasingly regarded not only as a folkloric menu. You see those examples here, including dry stone walling, where Slovenia is also part of this project. Here, this has nothing to do with a folkloric menu, right? Those are all examples that are example of experiences developed across different culture, and that are valued as inspiring examples of alternative ways of understanding the relationship with the nature and the universe. So, yes, for instance, this is dry stone walling is an example of something that allows to avoid landslide, and also that allows the water to flow through the stones, and therefore also avoiding problems with high rains and things like that. But also there are other examples, like examples of water management. And you see all those, it's quite interesting because in different parts of the world, different countries decided to list and to then for promote at the international level, not folk songs, dances, and craftsmanship, what used to be regarded as intangible cultural heritage in the early years of the convention, but systems of water management. And this, from South America, North Africa, or the Arab countries. And these are all quite recent nomination, and so this reflects this change in the understanding of intangible cultural heritage. Also, there are a few fishing techniques that are regarded as non-extractivist fishing techniques. or agropastoral techniques. I don't know if beekeeping can be regarded as an agropastoral technique, but anyway, this is an example from Slovenian. So these are all examples that showcase a different perspective on intangible cultural heritage. Here you also have examples of non-extractivist uses of natural resources. But also practices that have to do with healthcare and well-being, that again do not have this folkloric flavor, I would say. So if we go back to this sentence that sustainable development is at the heart of the convention, I would like now so what I try to show is that it was not at the heart of the convention in the beginning, but it is being introduced. It is being a bit imposed also for aligning with UN priorities of sustainable development. But at the same time, it is not false either, because of the special temporality underpinning the idea of safeguarding, which therefore means ensuring the viability and so transmitting to future generation. And so I will try to explain this empirically through my observation. Starting from this situation that I was able to observe in 2015, where when the chapter on of the operational directive on ICH and sustainable development was discussed within the Intergovernmental Committee for the Safeguarding of the Intangible Cultural Heritage. So it is a committee that it is composed by 24 states that change every a few years. So, and at that time, Belgium was one of these 24 states. And so the Belgian delegate took the floor when the draft chapter was discussed, and he proposed to delete the adjective traditional in front of the terms that in this draft chapter refer to domains of intangible cultural heritage. So like farming, healing, health practices, pedagogical methods, water management system, and so on. So those amendments are interesting because they are, I would say, a normative statement on the temporality of intangible cultural heritage and highlight how this idea of intangible cultural heritage as being non-traditional, non-past oriented is increasingly explicit within the official UNESCO discourse when sustainable development becomes really a core concept for the convention. So I now have a couple of more theoretical slides to discuss and introduce this idea of heritage temporalities. So, of course, we know that we all know that heritage making is a process that is intended at connecting the present with the past and the future. And in this process, it reflects the kind of relationship that we establish with cultural transmission and the social and political functions that we ascribed to it. And of course, also we know that heritage is always produced in the present and for present ends. So what has been called, for instance, the presentism of heritage. So we decide today that we want to turn something into heritage because of the values that we have today, because of the needs that we have today. So it is in the present that we make heritage, that we produce heritage. So in a classic perspective, heritage is a claim through which a group of people builds its own genealogy, establishing a link between generations and so ensuring a continuity with the past. And its preservation allows us to represent ourselves as coming from a particular past. And this is why also heritage has been very much criticized as a reactionary endeavor, as something that can be also a nationalist endeavor, because it's a way for to claim an identity in a way, which comes from the past. So, in this classic perspective, heritage results from a tension between the present and the past. And future generations are there as the ultimate recipients of conservation efforts. But in this classic approach, what is transmitted here is the survival, like the relics of the past that are conserved in order to preserve their authenticity. So this is what we are transmitting to future generations. Instead, following the logic of the Belgian amendment, intangible cultural heritage is intended to have still potential for playing a role in society, not arresting change, so not through the conservation of its authenticity, because we don't conceive of it as being traditional. So, in this way, heritage is intended as a tool not for producing the past in a way, but for producing the future, for manufacturing the future. It's not about tradition. And this idea is already part of the UNESCO narrative. For example, already in 2002, you see this quote from Koichiro Matsuura, who was the Director General of UNESCO, who says that intangible cultural heritage is not just a memory of past culture, but also a laboratory for inventing the future. However, it is not this kind of discursive evidence that allows us to understand how in practice intangible cultural heritage works as a laboratory for inventing the future. UNESCO designs this shift in very practical way, using the tools at the disposal of an international bureaucracy that are administrative tools, basically. Such, for instance, as the nomination form that is used for inscribing particular practices on the international list. And this form has been evolving recently to emphasize the importance of sustainable development, for instance, but already in the previous form that I used in this project that I will describe now, it was already quite clear that the focus was not the past, but the future. So I will now very briefly give you an example of how those administrative tools really try to promote an idea of heritage as being future-oriented. The project that I would like to discuss is the project that Spela mentioned earlier, so the nomination of the Festival of the City of Pisa in Italy, called Luminara. So for a couple of years, 2012-2014, I was involved in this project, working with the municipality, with an anthropologist that was based at the local university, and with civil society organizations. So the Luminara Festival commemorates San Ranieri, the city patron of the town, on the 16th of June. Of course, Pisa is better known for her tangible heritage, but the municipality in this case wanted to promote intangible heritage. So what happens during this festival every year? There are those special ephemeral wooden structures that are fixed to the buildings in the historical center of Pisa on the banks of the river Arno. And then the wooden structures are fixed to the windows. And then those structures support thousands of candles that are lit at the sunset. And this, then everybody gathers along the banks of the river to admire the effects of the lights. And this results in this effect that is regarded by the inhabitants as a magic atmosphere, which make them very proud of their belonging to the city of Pisa, so much so that many people that are now emigrated in other parts of Italy or abroad come back for this occasion to their hometown. So I'm not focusing here on the festival itself, but on the process that was necessary to turn this festival, this cultural practice, into a potential element of intangible cultural heritage. And this is an example of what my colleague Peter Larsen has called soft guidance. So this is far from being simply a form of technical assistance, but really has structuring effects. And here, so I was an agent of this soft guidance and had the normative task to guide my interlocutors in the preparation of this nomination. And this was not always easy because it was a very frustrating process for my interlocutors because it did not allow them to present their culture in the way they would have done without this guidance. So, for instance, one of them told me that I was driving them crazy with this pigeonholing into the form. So this formatting was perceived as a very bureaucratic procedure. But these bureaucratic procedures also is interesting because even if it was very frustrating, it also had structuring effects on the representation of the temporality of intangible cultural heritage. Because it was clear when I arrived in Pisa for the first time that there were several discrepancies between the ways my interlocutor understood the heritage value of this festival and the UNESCO perspective. So for them, thinking the Luminara as heritage entailed demonstrating how it was a survival from the past. So the first place I was taken to as soon as I arrived were the archives, based on the assumption that the evidence of the antiquity of the event was necessary for its recognition as heritage. Then I was given a pile of books on the history of the Luminara. I was taken to discuss with old people and local historians who reassured me that the event changed didn't change over the years. But I had to tell them that we only had few lines in this form to describe the historic aspect of the element and that the authenticity was a taboo concept. So what was important for this nomination was to explain how the practice actually changed over the years and how it stayed meaningful and vital today. So to prepare the nomination, we had to work on so-called safeguarding measures that would ensure the viability of this festival. So we eventually had to shift the focus from the past of the festival to its future. So working on, for instance, what they suggested was to work on how to recycle the plastic and the aluminium of the cups supporting the candles, and how to develop cultural tourism based on storytelling, and also new urban planning project to modify the traditional space of the festival thanks to new structure that would be designed by international artists. So the need to fit into the UNESCO term forced a shift in local representations of heritage and of its transmission. The model of conservation of things past was replaced by that of safeguarding. So heritage here was no longer regarded as something to be preserved, but as a project for the future. So while heritage conservation is intended usually at resisting change, to conserving, preserving, safeguarding intangible cultural heritage becomes an opportunity for fostering change and innovation. In this perspective, the temporality of heritage changes. So intangible cultural heritage does not embody anymore a responsibility toward the past, as in the classic perspective of heritage, so in a kind of a duty of memory, but a responsibility toward the future. So in other words, I argue that intangible cultural heritage, as it is designed by UNESCO, is not a tool for nostalgically retrieving the past in order to legitimate projects in the present. Instead, is a tool for imagining possible future. So this is really the main difference and the reason why, in a way, sustainable development is at the heart of the convention and has always been at the heart of the convention. So in this perspective, future generations are important targets in both cases, also in the classic perspective of heritage preservation. But in that case, it is a way to ensure that future generations can represent themselves as coming from a particular past. Instead, the safeguarding of ICH is a way to ensure that they have the tools and the resources to navigate in a future which appears increasingly uncertain and threatening. So in this case, a future with less plastic, what they suggest, and with resources coming from so-called cultural tools. So here, knowledge transmitted from previous generation is regarded as a way to cope with crisis and uncertainty. So I argue that this process of sustainabilization entails two fundamental shifts in the temporal framework of heritage and in the social and political uses of heritage. Because heritage making is if we shift the temporal framework, also the cultural and the social and political uses of heritage change. So it is not a way to claim identity, an identity claim, but is a way to take advantage of the past, of the experience that we have, that we were able to put together through generations as a resource that can be useful for the future. So basically, the shift is from understanding heritage as an identity building tool to understanding heritage as a resource for facing new scenarios or for dealing with the problems of our present and future. Well, this is what I have already said, basically. So, and avalanche risk management, which was inscribed by Switzerland and Austria, and on which I have worked during the last year, is a good example of that, because you have those knowledges that have been transmitted from generation of people in the Alpine region that know how to deal in case of avalanche. But this is not promoted here as a way to claim an identity, as, you know, to be proud of the fact, yes, also to be proud, but the idea is not to is not intended at identity building. Is really intended here, this knowledge as an experience that can be useful in the future in case of an extreme event, and that can be also shared with other people. So in conclusion, the sustainabilization of intangible cultural heritage reflects a crucial shift which changes the ways in which heritage is represented. Heritage has always been defined against the idea and the anxiety of loss. But in the case, and this is also, this anxiety of loss is why we have created museums, archives, why we want to preserve a building or an archaeological site and so on. But in the case of intangible cultural heritage, this loss is not only behind us, but is also in front of us. It is yet to come. Because what is perceived today as fundamentally threatened are not particular cultural practices or cultures from the past, but clearly the possibility of human life on planet Earth, because this is the anxiety that we all share in this historical moment. I mean, in the anthropogenic anxiety, I would say. So, thinking intangible cultural heritage in terms of sustainable development reflects a fundamental shift in perspective, where it is not anymore about us protecting heritage, but rather about heritage protecting us. So this is the final thought of my presentation, and I would be glad to discuss it with you. And as I said, these are the ideas that are more that I presented are also present in those recent publications. So this is a little bit of an advertisement at the end of my presentation. So thank you very much.